2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe Libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. And tonight is an interesting night. It's going to be a fun night. We are bringing a friend back to talk about The Dark Knight. And in this case, it's going to be The Dark Knight Returns, which is a Frank Miller comic book that came out in, the mid-'80s and got turned into an animated feature, part 1 and 2, in I want to say 2012, about 6 years ago, and it's really quite good. Lots of good themes in it, and it will be the feature for actualanarchy.com/96, the show notes page. Let's say hello to Robert, and then our guest, and then we'll get into the Last Nighters portion of the show and get into this flick.
What's up, everybody? How you doing? Yeah. This is a film that I pitched way back that we're finally doing. When I first saw this a couple of years ago, I had forgotten how good the comic was. And it reminded me just the themes that Frank Miller was playing around with in his early 20s, quite mature for his age, as I recall. And there's all kinds of fun, individualism versus collectivism type things going on in this one. So stay tuned.
Alrighty, and let's say hello to Shaheen. Shaheen is our friend from Adelaide, Australia. He's been on with us for 2 of the Christopher Nolan flicks, so look back through our catalog for those, Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises. He's a really good guy. He's been writing recently for Backwards, the band fronted by Eric July, and so you can find his work up there and also on actualanarchy.com. And Shaheen, let's save the rest of your introductory information for when we get into the Last Nighters, but go ahead and say hello for now, and then we'll get into that portion of the show.
All right. Hey, how's it going? I'm glad to be back.
All right, and that'll do it. For this portion of the show, let's get into the Last Nighters. Hey everyone, it's the Last Nighters, Daniel and Robert, and we are here talking about The Dark Knight Returns, comic book feature film animated. This is episode 39 of The Last Nighters. You can find the show notes and more at lastnighters.com/39. We have a special guest coming to us from Australia. He's a good friend of ours, and we will have him introduce himself in a moment. But let's say hello to Robert. Then we'll get to our guest, and then we'll get into the Google description, and then we'll get into discussing the movie, and then we'll get into our Patreon plugs, and then we'll get into, I forget what's on the list after that. Oh, this. This episode is part of the Launchpad Media. The Last Nighters is part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. So if you want to find out more unique content that's coming out every day, go to thelaunchpadmedia.com. See, I got that plug in early, Robert.
Well done, Daniel. That's a lot of things we're going to have to get into. I like it. Putting the pressure on. Yeah, we're going to talk about this older, grislier, rawer Batman in this film. So this will be a good one, I think.
Agreed, and Circle gets that square. And let's introduce Shaheen. Shaheen, tell our audience, the Last Nighter audience, who you are, where you're from, and what you like, what's your favorite color, and then we'll get into the Google description.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? My name's Shaheen. I live in Adelaide, Australia. I'm a university student. I study engineering. I like to read books, play games, go out with friends, have some barbecues here and there, just overall have fun, I guess. Anything else you want me to say? Favorite color?
Yeah, there you go.
Black and yellow, for no particular reason.
Well, that's 2, but that's okay. You're not being you're being very inclusive. You're allowing multiple colors to be into your favorites. Now there used to be.
Well, I said black. That's a token, though, because I don't want to come across as a white supremacist again. That happens every now and then.
Yes, and that is an unfortunate consequence of believing in the free market, unfortunately. All right, well, we will give you another chance at the end to plug where people can follow you and find your work. So just keep that in mind, and don't let us end the show without you being able to do that. But we start out the show with the Google description. So here we go. There's 2 parts to this. Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, Part 1 and Part 2. Came out in 2012, 8 on the IMDb, 100% Rotten Tomatoes. People love this thing. 95% of Google users like it. And description for Part 1 is Bruce Wayne, voiced by Peter Weller, is now 55 years old, comes out of retirement to don the cape and cowl. As Batman, he fights his old enemies, the Joker and Two-Face, for the final time. Then an old ally arrives and is looking for one last fight. The other, Part 2, which we will also discuss tonight, came out a year later and is 8.4 out of 10 on the IMDb. 97% of Google users like that one. And its description is Batman and his new sidekick Robin deal with the Joker's newest plot, while Superman brings a global catastrophe to Gotham City. Robert, your thoughts on the description, and then pass the mic to where you like.
Yeah, that's about what happens. I mean, it's super simplified, of course. You can't get into too much, but it's not wrong. I want to say that Peter Weller did a fantastic job voicing Batman. It's old and it's grizzled, just like Peter Weller is. And all the performances are really strong, although I must say I prefer Mark Hamill's Joker to whoever does the Joker in this version. But the script is mature. It's playing with some really interesting themes in terms of like our perspective, like free market libertarianism sort of thing. And it's just a more, I don't know, it's like, I've already said it, but it's a more mature storyline. This is one of those comics that are like the foundational pillars of what good comic books are. Especially back in the day before Image really brought in the all kinds of different creator-owned stuff. This was like the adult comics, like this and Alan Moore's Watchmen, and then maybe like Astro City from Kurt Busiek, or I don't know, all kinds of other stuff, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But these are like the adult version of comic books that I would always point to and saying, hey, comic books aren't just for kids. This is like adult fare that everybody can appreciate, like this story. And it's because it plays with, you know, adult themes. I mean, what do we see constantly, day in, day out, is this battle between individualism and collectivism. People are constantly wanting to steal other people's stuff versus people who just want to be left alone and keep their stuff. It's this constant battle. And this plays out in this film on a Titanic scale. And I don't know, it's just really well done. I'd love to see a live action version of this, but I also enjoy the animated version. So, Shaheen, your initial thoughts on the films?
It's one of my personal favorite comics. Like when I was in high school, we had to do book reviews. Every time I had a different teacher, I made sure to repeat this because we had the comic in the library at my high school, so I'd always check that out and read it. And it's probably one of my favorite comic book storylines of all time. I mean, one of the main reasons why I liked Batman so much is because of this comic.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I've heard that this is a very faithful adaptation of the comic itself, which I have not read, but I did watch both of these films recently, and I did enjoy them. But Shaheen, what do you think, since you've done several reports on this and read it a fair amount? How faithful were they to the comic origin?
Well, I reckon as much as it's possible to make it still come across as a movie. I mean, they could have gone one step further and made it a bit more like Sin City. I think that's the most faithful you can make a movie or a live adaptation, whatever, to a comic. But this was very faithful.
Yeah, in watching it, it seemed like there were 4 or 5 distinct storylines going on, and I could only imagine that a comic series such as this probably had a few more going on, so they had to maybe pick a few to leave out.
Well, actually, there were 4 comic series. There was the first one, which is Batman coming back and fighting Harvey Dent and Two-Face. The second one, which was him fighting the mutants. Third one, which was Joker, and fourth one, Superman. And they didn't leave any content out, but there was sequels to it, something called The Dark Knight Strikes Again. But other than that, they didn't leave anything out. There was no filler. It's everything's in here.
Okay. Now, did the film like blend them a little bit more than, say, in the comic? Because to me, it felt like there were some distinct lines, but the mutants were pretty consistent throughout.
Oh, yeah, it's the same in the comics.
Okay. All right. Well, Robert, you want to pick up from there?
Well, I just want to mention that if anybody's interested, there was, like Shane mentioned, there's a sequel to this series, and then there's a third episode, I guess. I don't know if it's finished now or it's still being made. I haven't read it, but Frank Miller is still making content. In my view, he's dropped off. He's not as good as he once was, but to each his own, I suppose. I didn't personally like the sequel to Dark Knight Returns nearly as well as I enjoyed the original, but it is fun that he's still a creator alive today doing stuff.
Yeah, in watching it, I felt like I was surprised it was made in the 80s because it seems like a lot of the themes are relevant to present day. Like everyone's calling everyone else a fascist, and they're always talking about all the marching they did and how it did or didn't make a difference, and hey, give me another hit of that.
I got them. I wrote them down.
Yeah,
and when I watched it as a kid, I never really got them. Like they were there, and like you heard it here and there. But now, when I'm like very involved in Twitter and everything in the realm of politics, it just stands out so much. Like Miller, the writer, would obviously have to have some sort of political knowledge to write all this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So what we're referring to is there's a couple of like Robin's parents are like the kind of jaded protester type people, maybe in their 30s or something like that, and they're looking back on their life and they're saying, you know, it's like that all that marching we did never happened. Don't say that. We made a difference.
Oh yeah, it's just all these fascists. Give me another shot of that.
Yeah, so in a way, it felt rather prescient, right? Like it was maybe how Idiocracy was a bit of a fortune-telling crystal ball of the future. Perhaps this story was a little bit as well. I mean, it's kind of a dystopian version of Batman, but they do have the entire city descend into chaos. And I think because Batman had retired 10 years prior, that crime just kept increasing and increasing. And then these gangs, the mutant gangs, which, Shaheen, did you refer to them as like left anarchist types during some of our chats earlier?
Yeah, they remind me of ANCOMs. It's just their style, the way they look, and like they're we're gonna take over the city, that kind of mentality. Just they really come across as the ANCOMs.
So
And
sort
the
of like
fact
this mob rule, like they are the law, and so they're going to stamp out private property and kind of enforce
they
their
rule the city for themselves,
right,
or whatever they seem fit. Although I reckon that Frank Miller, obviously, he would. You could tell that he's not pro the type of left wing. He's definitely not pro left wing. Like this type of Batman always gets called fascist online as well. And I think Frank Miller actually said that he's actually a libertarian. But he wrote Batman in this to be a libertarian. But you can tell that he was kind of modeling the mutants after the ANCOMs. Like it was just, I don't know how to explain it. It just seems so apparent.
Yeah, it does seem like they're a bunch of angry kids who want to use violence to get what they want, but then if they were to get it, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Like it would quickly descend into just destruction and fallout. Like they wouldn't have any idea of actually how to run anything if they were to actually get what they wanted. They just seem to be a bunch of angry kids, and it's clear in the movie the way they go from worshiping the leader to worshiping Batman to worshiping the breasted woman, I forget her name, but just whoever it is.
Bruno? Was it Bruno?
Just they're looking to follow somebody. Like, please have an idea of what to do because I clearly don't.
Yeah, swasta nipples. It seemed like they wanted to follow anyone who had nipples, right? Because even the head mutant guy, the mutant leader, he had these big black nipples, and then the Bruno had big Nazi swastika nipples. And Batman, of course, is famous for having bat nipples in the Joel Schumacher version.
We shouldn't talk about those movies. They never happened.
They never happened. That's right.
Although I do appreciate any good nipple theory, Daniel.
Well, that is the one red thread going throughout the entire Batman genre here is the nipples. I wrote down one comment, and I thought it was kind of interesting in that the purse snatcher called trying to steal a purse an honest living. And I found that kind of interesting. Yeah. Do you think that...
Is that when Robin jumps out?
Yes, it tries to scare the guy. And I felt as if it was one of those, well, because I'm poor and that person's rich, I can take from them, and that's honest.
Absolutely. That is. I've had a discussion with a socialist who believed that very thing, that any kind of violence used to redistribute their, ill-gained wealth, in their view, is justified, regardless of whether or not you can actually prove that their wealth was ill-gotten or not. They say because they're part of the system, whatever that is, they must have gotten their wealth by ill means. Therefore, they can just rob anybody, and it's completely justified.
Yeah. Something else about all the background characters I noticed, how a lot of them came across as social justice warriors. Like they'd say, "Oh, Batman is, I don't know, violating people's civil rights," and then he says, "Oh, but oh no, I wouldn't live in the city." Did you notice that guy in the interviews?
Yeah, I was wondering about what you guys thought about Batman in this movie. If you thought if there was ever a point at which you were not on board with what he was doing, like is there ever a time where he's violating the NAP or? Because I mean that's usually my criticism of a lot of superheroes is oftentimes they will either destroy private property when it doesn't need to be destroyed, or they will go out and assault somebody based on who knows what reasoning. But in this movie, what did you guys think? Shaheen, what did you think about that?
I don't think I didn't disagree with what Batman does, and like let's say he smashes through a wall or breaks a window to get someone. That is usually when the bad guy is doing the bad stuff. The bad guy is violating the NAP, and so Batman's kind of stopping him from doing it. So therefore, Batman breaking the window, that window should be compensated by the criminal.
Right. Yeah. There's a specific time in this movie, and it bugs me when the Joker is running around in the tunnel of love and he's massacring all these people. He's killing people left and right. Well, Batman finally sees he's had enough and he goes and he has this showdown with the Joker and he ends up killing the Joker. And then Joker's like, uh-oh, you're in trouble now. And then all the cops call him a murderer and they go, we're going to have this manhunt and we're going to get the Batman. Why isn't the Batman like this huge hero? He stopped the Joker from murdering who many knows how many people more he would have murdered. Plus he was defending, it seemed like a convenience for the script. And that's like one tiny little criticism of this movie more than something that would really happen. I mean, I know the police were out to get him. Mm-hmm. They wanted him with the new police, the commissioner lady. But if he's going and defending these other people, he's the hero, regardless of what happens to the Joker.
Yeah, that's something that a lot of superhero movies have and this came in, I think, in the Silver Age of comics in the, I think, 50s or 60s. I'm not sure when it came in, but they kind of had them stop killing so much. And so that became Batman's golden rule of, I'll never kill or never carry guns, because he had to become more child-friendly because of regulations. Before that, Batman had no problem breaking people's necks, punching off buildings, hanging them from his bat jet. So yeah, I think that thing, like when someone's stabbing you in the gut, and Batman still didn't kill the Joker, he just put him in paralysis. Joker broke his own neck.
Right. I mean, I know the long-standing argument is that, Batman is so skilled that he can take out anybody without killing them. But Batman doesn't have some kind of special morality that the rest of us don't. So if you're defending somebody and you end up killing the person that was attacking them, you're not guilty of murder. I'm sorry, you're just not.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I think regardless of what Batman's skill level is, if he is in a situation where someone is directly attacking him in self-defense or self-defense of others, he can just kill the guy who is initiating force, Joker or any other thugs. But it's execution that I have a problem with, which I think is immoral, not killing while battling.
So do you think that counted as an execution? Or
no?
Okay.
No.
Okay.
That was 100. Like he was getting stabbed to death. If he didn't do that, he probably was going to die.
Right, and to your point earlier, the Joker actually killed himself to pin the blame on Batman because it's supposedly well known that Batman doesn't kill, and so the Joker was like, "This is my final card I'm playing. They're going to think you murdered me." And then the police will come after you. Even though, Robert, you're exactly correct. The Joker had just killed like 24 people. Even if
Batman had just taken out a gun and blown Joker's head off, he's still not guilty of murder.
No, yeah, he's totally justified. He's a hero in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was a moment where I felt like maybe Batman did go too far, and that was with the mutant leader.
Okay.
Because in the first battle, he's got the Bat Tank, or they call it the Batmobile, right? But it's the Bat Tank. And he's got the rubber bullets and all of this. And he tries to go toe-to-toe with the guy who's probably half his age, because Batman's 55 years old in this one. And he ends up losing that fight, and then he comes back later on and uses more wily tactics, make sure that they're fighting in the mud, and uses his brains instead of his brawn. But doesn't he break the guy's arm and then continue injuring him? Like he's got him pinned down, he's got him somewhat defenseless, and he's still kind of beating the crap out of him. It's a little fuzzy.
That's where he gives the operating table line. He's like, this is the mud hole, this is an operating table.
Exactly, yeah. So I felt like maybe he went a little bit too far there. And that reminded me to the scene where we meet Bruno in that pharmacy, and Batman's dressed as an old lady and ends up defending the guy who owns the store. And then as he's chasing Bruno, he comes back to tell the store owner who's got a gun drawn on one of the punks, hey, if you pull that trigger, I'm coming back for you. So that's sort of like the opposite of what was happening with Mutant Leader, where he's saying once the threat's been neutralized, going any further is an aggression. And this has happened. There was a pharmacy in like Oklahoma maybe 20 years ago where it was getting robbed, and the pharmacist did defend himself with a firearm, and then he exacted justice, like revenge style, on the perpetrator, who was already disarmed and no longer a threat. And so the pharmacist got charged with murder as a result of going that one step too far.
Okay, so what exactly are you saying, Daniel? Are you saying that Batman was in the wrong for telling the pharmacist not to shoot the guy?
No, I think that was totally fine. That's legit. Once the threat's neutralized, you really shouldn't go any further. Of course, emotions will be running high, and this guy just tried to rob you, threatened your life. Things might happen. But if you do have your wits about you, you shouldn't go beyond neutralizing the threat. But in contrast to that, I felt like with the Mutant Leader, he did go too far, but it was to demonstrate his dominance over the Mutant Leader to gain the favor of the adoring gang, right?
Right.
Because they became, following him, they became the sons of Batman as a result of that. So he was doing it for a purpose, but I still felt like maybe he went a bit too far.
Something that I wanted to add to that. When Batman's fighting the Mutant Leader, I just assumed in order to properly neutralize someone like the Mutant Leader, you would have to break his bones. And if we go by proportionality, I mean, the Mutant Leader has killed countless people, and he just killed the mayor while he was in custody. And wasn't it Rothbard's theory that Walter Block's, that if someone kills someone, like let's say someone kills a family member of mine, therefore for reparations, I own their life, and therefore like I can hold a public execution or something like that. I disagree with that because I don't believe in death penalties. But if someone, let's say, does kill someone and is a rapist or a murderer, and they're caught and they're still alive, I don't have any problem with breaking limbs or even amputations in some cases, extreme cases. It's just that final murder that I'm against. So I think Batman, by dishing out justice to the Mutant Leader by breaking his limbs, is justified, and is also justified by telling the store owner not to kill the surrendered mutant. But the store owner should have a right to maybe, I don't know, shoot the thief in the leg just to ensure that he doesn't get away.
It's interesting. I like hearing all the different ideas of what, justice are, because justice is such a unique personal concept.
It seems rather subjective, yeah.
Yeah, it's super subjective. What's justice to one person and what's justice to another person can be two wildly different things. And it just reinforces the idea that the state, with its one way of doing justice, is wholly inadequate to serving all the billions of people that it tries to serve. It's a complete joke.
Yeah,
there is one
second
that.
that.
There is one part where I kind of felt like it was a gut reaction that man went too far. It was, when the guy comes home. It was in the first movie. The Two-Face thug. Batman breaks his leg and he gets released from jail and he comes back home. Then he pushes him through the glass and tells him, "I'm the only one who can take you to a hospital in time." Now, the way I rationalize that is if it was a proper justice system, not a corrupt, unjust statist one, they would have dealt with it accordingly. So Batman is just using vigilante justice to fix the errors of the current justice system.
Right.
Yeah, he's sort of working within that paradigm.
Mm.
And it is kind of an interesting thing because you bring it up. It's not as if Batman intended to cause an artery cut that would make the guy bleed out, right? It just happens to have been the result of pushing him through the glass window. But in a way, like, Batman's responsible for that, for the effects of that, right? Like he now he is the one who undertook the action that caused this to happen. But in a way, it puts pressure on the guy. If he wants to live, Batman does have the ability to help save him, but he has to talk. And that almost brings up that that Rothbardian, like you're under no positive obligation to feed your kids, right? It's like, would Batman be under a positive obligation to seek help for this guy, or would he be justified in withholding care from him?
The way I thought of that is, so this guy, for a fact that he works for Two-Face. He was in the robbery. He was trying to shoot him. So for the justice system just to let him go and to not interrogate him, get the information out of him, that is a violation of the NAP of the people whose money just got robbed, or the people who are in potential danger because of Two-Face. So Batman had every right to threaten the life of this guy to get that information out.
Interesting. Goes back layers and layers. I tend to agree with both of you. I think once Batman pushes the guy through the window, he kind of owns the injuries that the guy sustains from the window. And it's on him to have an obligation in the way that I think that if you, of your own will, and then have sex and create a baby, it's, you've created a contract with this baby and you need to feed it.
Until it's an adult.
Until
an
it
adult is
claims
arbitrary.
the ability to do so of its own.
Yeah.
In the same way that if the guy had said, just stay away from me, I got this, I can take care of myself, then Batman, you're free to do whatever you want and leave. But if he doesn't and he says, man, help me, then he's absolutely, until that point that he says, no, I'm okay, then I think Batman has an obligation to correct that which he created.
Yeah. One thing I think Batman would have an obligation to fix, to correct what he created, given that the guy give the information up. Because in a way, that guy is indirectly violating other people's, or potentially violating their NAP by being a Two-Face and being involved in his terrorist acts. So, but Batman goes after him. It's like, let's say someone kidnaps your wife, so you point a gun at his head and you say, tell me where my wife is, or I'm going to shoot you. So he's saying, tell me where this plan, what Two-Face's plan is, or I'm going to let you bleed to death. Do you get what I'm trying to say? It makes sense up here, but I don't know if I'm conveying it right.
Yeah, we might need to revisit this one in our Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters. So if you'd like to hear more discussion on this point, go to lastnighters.com/Patreon and get our Kathleen Turner Overdrive package, our special package. But let's move on because we are about halfway through the allotted time for the show. I do have so much more that I want to bring up. So let's move into the Sons of Batman, the vigilante gang. After Batman defeats the mutant leader, all these gang members become Sons of Batman, and they still continue exacting vigilante justice against other criminals. And there's commentary in the news media questioning whether Batman bears some responsibility for what they are doing, what they're doing in his name. And this sounds very, very much like present day, where people often try to get Jordan Peterson with gotcha questions about, oh, you're followed by a lot of white men, and they do a lot of X and a lot of Y. So what do you think about that? Are you responsible for that? So let's go down this path for just a few minutes, Robert.
Sure. So this is the constant. There's actually a bill that got passed, I believe, in the EU. I forget the name of it, but it's essentially putting the responsibility of, if I'm getting my facts correct, I could be getting this wrong, but this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it so that website owners, even small blogs or whatever, are responsible for the comments made on those websites. And if those comments, fall into the lines of hate speech, whatever that is, whatever definition that is today, or whatever, then they're going to be, liable for whatever. Much in the same way that, YouTubers will get bashed for the actions of their viewers, as if you had any control once you put up a video on YouTube, who then watches it. And then as if you have any as if you had control over who watches it, and then had further control over what those people then do. It's ridiculous. It's a violation of self-ownership. It puts the onus on people who have zero control over other human beings. And it's like these people who are these busybody control freaks who just want to control everybody else and dominate the world, imagining that everybody else has that same ability and responsibility. It's, I don't know, man. It's a weird world we live in.
Yeah, I kind of couldn't have put it better myself. Essentially, I tend to believe when someone says something and puts out a message, it's like a computer signal. Like if I say, if I say something, I'm putting out a signal, and when you hear it, you're receiving that signal, and how you interpret it, what you do about it, comes as a result of your computer, which is owned by you, or which is your mind, has nothing to do with me. Therefore, I can go around and tell people, I don't know, become a neo-Nazi and go, I don't know, get the gas chambers running again. They're going to quote me on this, I know it. But I bear no responsibility, maybe some social responsibility, but no actual legal responsibility for what someone else does, despite what I have done them, unless I force them to do it, this isn't the case.
Right. If I had the power to convince other people to do things, first of all, the whole world would be a libertarian anarchistic society. And then also, I'd have everybody send me money. Just everybody. I'd have the power to do that. So everybody send me $100 right now.
You'd be Osho.
Yeah, baby.
From the wild, wild country, which I don't know if you caught that, Shaheen, but we talked with Pat McFarlane and a bunch of other guest hosts because he was busy studying for the bar. So we talked through that whole series for the whole summer at libertyweekly.net/WWC. A lot of fun. If you haven't seen Wild Wild Country, it's on Netflix. It's a great documentary. And then our commentary, not as good, but still pretty good.
I'll give it a look.
All right, so let's move on a little bit because I have so much more to say. What did you guys think of Jim Gordon's Roosevelt worship, where he was talking
I
about...
wrote that down also.
Yeah, where he was talking about how great Roosevelt was, but then it turns out, well, he might have known Pearl Harbor was coming. And so I went back and forth.
I wrote that down.
And then I realized, who am I? He's too big to judge. And he was drawing a comparison between Roosevelt and Batman.
To be fair, he is a police commissioner, so what do you expect?
True, but it's almost giving a pass to people not being able to judge for themselves whether something is immoral or not. Like, I mean, it's one thing to not have all the facts of a situation, but it's another thing to say, well, I just, these people over here, if he really did know about Pearl Harbor and it got us into the war and millions of people died in that war, but if we hadn't done it, maybe millions of people would have died anyway. It just seems to be like you're giving somebody a pass because you're afraid to make a moral judgment.
It's a cop-out for the cops.
Yeah.
It's a cop-out situation.
I think it is, Daniel. I think you can judge Roosevelt as an immoral person based on what we know of what he did. You don't need to have to know every single thing that happened to make a judgment on that.
Right. And then there's plenty of things that he fully admitted to doing that were awful, like the internment camps, yet still the left seems to praise the guy. They're worried about Trump creating camps when they love a guy who literally did do a camp based on race.
I think FDR is ranked number 1 amongst Democrats.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah. And then Lincoln's right up there, too, and he was also quite terrible.
Yeah, he was awful. I actually bought Di Lorenzo's book. Should be coming in from the UK anytime now. The real Lincoln.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So that should be fun.
All right, so speaking of super status, let's get into Superman working for the government, or like I like to call him, super bitch.
Before that, can I just mention something that I like? How Batman goes to the corrupt military leader who was selling arms to the mutant gang.
Oh, yeah. Let's get into that.
CIA selling weapons.
Yeah, the general was selling weapons to the mutant gang, yes.
Very reminiscent of what the CIA does.
Yeah, that's probably ripped straight out of the headlines, and something that the CIA has been caught doing over and over and over and over again is arming different rebel groups or different militants around the globe whenever they want to overthrow somebody.
Well, this was written around the time the Iran-Contra scandal was happening, like Oliver North and all of that, right? Mid-'80s. Reagan was president and all of those things. It really seemed like Frank Miller was not playing favorites. Like no group was safe. Like he picked on the hippies, he picked on the conservative Republican types, he picked on the ANCOMs, he picked on the wishy-washy SJW,
But he did say that, someone like in an interview asked him, people say this Batman's a fascist. What do you say? He said something like, if I recall, he said, no, Batman's not a fascist. He doesn't work for the state. Those who think Batman is a fascist don't know their politics. If anything, Batman would be a libertarian, which I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's what he said.
All right, well, that'll be a quote that I will search for to put on our show notes page. And again, that show notes page will be lastnighters.com/39. Let's get into Superman, shall we? Working for the government.
First off, he's doing foreign intervention in Corto Maltese.
Yes, yeah, he's being a super weapon fighting the military battles rather unfairly.
Much like Dr. Manhattan in The Watchmen when he was exploding young, small Asian people. Yeah, this is a Superman that is chug-a-lugging the Kool-Aid. He is fully on board with whoever the president is the authority, and he has to, like, whenever he's given like an order from the president, he must obey it as if he's like a soldier in the U.S. Army. He's really just Reagan's lackey, Reagan's muscle to do whatever he wants, regardless of whether or not it's right or wrong. Like he applies no moral judgment of whatever he's being asked to do of his own. He's an unthinking killing machine, and which is probably fairly out of character, I suppose, for or Superman in general. Like if this was written from Superman's perspective, it probably would have been a little bit more sympathetic, a little more internal dialogue for him. But we get Batman's point of view, and we just see Clark as this, mindless soldier for hire, I guess. And it's, but also at the same time, he's kind of playing up, like Frank Miller's kind of taking a jab at like patriotism and like the American way. And like, there's that shot with Clark, and he's standing there astride the like log, and like the eagle lands on his arm. And yet he's this total lackey for some corrupt president guy.
Right. Yeah. And they did show Reagan mess up his speech and correct himself. He was like, oh yeah, we're over there for our oil interests or something. And he says, oh wait, I mean to spread freedom and democracy. I'm sort of paraphrasing, but I remember that there was a very distinct, he said the wrong thing. It was a little bit too
That happened
damning.
quite a few times. Did you that also happened with the mayor, I think? I don't remember exactly what it was. Wasn't it because the polls say so or something like that? I think
That sounds about right. Yeah, and they were doing the same thing in. We just started watching season 4 of BoJack Horseman, and Mr. Peanut Butter's running for governor, and they're like, "What's my position on fracking? We don't know yet. We don't have the poll numbers in."
Yep.
So good stuff. Good stuff. It's funny to see. Obviously, leftist people making fun of how government works, yet they seem to put blind faith in the process, even though it yielded them Trump, who's literally Hitler and pure evil.
But
it's very bizarre.
But Bernie's anti-establishment, bro. Come on.
Yeah, that I got a fever, and the only prescription is more government. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about how Superman thwarts the nuclear missile from landing in the United States, and it ends up in the desert, but there's still the EMP fallout and the resultant vigilante prevention of the looting that's going on. And some of the looters had some comments I felt were very Kropotkin-esque, like, oh, you see that stuff over there? If you want it, just go take it. So I'll go to you, Robert, on that.
Well, and then you had Gordon, who in a very kind of free market libertarian way, he kind of like rallies the rabble, and he's like, listen, the fire department's not coming. If you want to have a roof over your head tonight, we need to band together and put these fires out. I thought that was a really good moment in terms of, not necessarily relying on government or authority to do something, but taking direct action yourself and talking to other people with vested interests in having the same action take place, come together and do it.
Right, and individual responsibility, like taking responsibility for themselves, but working together, which a lot of people would conflate that with collectivism or try to confuse it with communism. But no, this is individuals choosing their self-interest and having to coordinate in an effort to do something that will benefit all of them voluntarily. So it's a key distinction here.
It is. Voluntarily.
And as a result, did you notice how Gotham was far better in terms of crime than every other city, or major city in the U.S. During that?
Yeah, they mentioned in the news reports that Gotham City was the only one that hadn't fallen into complete chaos, because I guess the EMP affected like the entire country or something like that. So pretty interesting stuff. Let's start winding this down a little bit, because we are running low on time. But I did want to ask you guys, and this might be a bit controversial, but what did you guys think of Batman fighting the cops on the roof? Like, it felt to me like he was sort of picking that fight with them. So in a way, he might have been a little bit of the aggressor, but he was trying to get into the building because he knew Joker was in there, and Joker was probably or highly likely to commit some heinous crime, which he ended up doing. So I'll go to you, Shaheen, and then to Robert.
Well, given the fact of their status, there isn't that much a problem, but let's see. Well, yeah, the cops were protecting the building, and he knows that if he goes there, tries to get in, he's going to get shot. And there's, of course, the anti-vigilante task force by the new commissioner. Like, if Gordon was in, they wouldn't have done it. And other than that, I guess the police would. He knows the Joker better than essentially everyone else. He knew Joker was doing something, which he was. So I guess, and with someone like the Joker, who has that much blood on his hands, it's okay to make an assumption, I guess, when someone is confirmed, when someone who would probably who should be getting 1,000 life sentences is just out there, and there's the possibility of him just murdering the entire room, which he does do. I guess Batman had every right to go there and not let that happen.
Yeah, for me, I didn't even think of this, but now that you mention it, it makes sense that it seems a bit gratuitous now that I think about it, that the Batman just like charges the rooftops when it's established that Batman's really good at sneaking into a place or being in disguise and getting into somewhere, no problem, without causing any kind of like violence happening. I don't remember if there was a time issue, like he didn't have time to get there and, sneak in, but probably, that's not what Frank Miller wanted to talk about. So he wanted the Joker to be able to kill some people, and I don't know. I guess you could see that as a weakness, but I like Shaheen's answer of they're statists, so
There's something else there. These are the police under the new, was it Helen, whatever. What was her name?
Right,
The new police commissioner? Yeah.
Right.
Who was very anti-Batman. And I was reading a book, I forget what it was called. I think it's by Samuel Conkin, an Agarist Primer or something, and it's about how, as opposed to statist justice, you can have vigilante justice, which is essentially what Batman is doing. Because Batman pretty much just defends against NAP. He doesn't go collecting tax money from people. He just defends against violent crime, which is just NAP. So them being anti-Batman is a violation of Batman's rights. Rights of dedicated him, so he has every right to go. Like, let's say if I'm in my city and there's a gang of people who have an anti-Shaheen rally or want to kill me, and they have their arm, and if they see me, they will shoot me, and I see them, I reckon I have the right just to go out there and take them down, if I know for a fact that they will open fire on me, and they're out to get me.
Interesting, Shaheen. I'll have to give some thought to that. There's a few more things I wanted to say. At one point, after the mutants and Batman and everybody has calmed the city down, and he's got like the support of the people, there's a little shot where the cops are like, what are we going to do? We're going to go arrest him? And the commissioner's like, nothing. We're not going to do anything. He's too big now. And that's just like...
That's what she said.
Yeah, it is what she said. And it also shows just how arbitrarily the enforcement of law is. Like, if this guy's too popular, if he has the support of the people, well, we can't arrest him. That's fine. He can break the law all he wants, but if everybody likes him, then we're not going to do that. But as soon as he's like a social pariah, well, then yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah, that's very deep. I just wrote down the police learnt their place. That's all I had.
I wish they did.
All right, I do have a question while you're looking at that, Robert. I wrote this note down. I don't remember who said it, but they said something to the effect of, you bear responsibility for all the people I've murdered by letting me live. Was that the Joker saying that?
Batman said that to Joker. So how many have I murdered by letting you live?
Oh, right. Yeah. So that struck me as not quite accurate. Like, Batman doesn't bear responsibility for Joker's actions, even though he probably had opportunity to prevent him from living, like, because he'd stopped him from doing whatever he had been doing at that time, but then he let him live, right? And then he went and did more horrific shit. But yeah. I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, Batman felt remorse, it sounds like, or felt some burden for having let Joker go.
I don't think Batman thought that it was his fault that he caused the murders, that he was in fact the murderer. It was just a way of saying it, I guess, that he just felt like, damn, if I just killed Joker the first time he caused trouble, all these people would still be alive. So he kind of thought whether or not he was, like, I don't know, like, he just thought that maybe if he had killed them earlier on, more people would be alive, and that's why he called himself a murderer. He actually thinks that he is a murderer.
Yeah, I think it's his remorse talking more than anything, more than any kind of admission of actual guilt. I think it's just, like what Shaheen said, that if I had actually killed him when I had the chance many, many times, all those other people wouldn't be dead. But I'm not the one that killed him. The Joker is the one that killed him. I don't have any positive obligations, but I had many opportunities to save more people's lives if I had just taken on that burden of being a killer, which Batman is famously not.
Like maybe he thinks he's a murderer subjectively, but not objectively. Like, he didn't violate any NAPs, but in his mind, he is a murderer because it's his responsibility to protect Gotham, and by not killing Joker or not putting him out of business completely, maybe by amputation or paralysis, he essentially allowed the murder of all these people.
That's an interesting point. Like, it's his, like, in his own mind, he has taken on the obligation of the security of Gotham City upon himself. Not that he can actually suffer the responsibility of every little thing that goes wrong in that area, but he probably feels it more than the average person does because he believes he's taken on that identity.
Yeah, and my comment would be that he probably had the moral okay in defending himself and defending others to have killed the Joker several times in the past, but he himself held himself back due to his additional moral standards that he had on himself. I feel like I'm bumbling here, but he could have killed Joker in self-defense or defense of another, but he held himself from doing so, and that led to the Joker's capability to go and inflict additional harms on more people. And so he's feeling regret or remorse over that. So not necessarily responsibility, and not like any legal responsibility, not that he has done anything particularly wrong. He just took the moral high ground maybe higher than he should have, looking back.
That's what I call the objective morality, which is, the NAP, and he didn't actually do anything himself. But subjectively, sorry, I've got a cold. Subjectively, like in his own morality, he thinks, he needs to defend people, and he did wrong by not killing Joker. So that could be what he's trying to do.
All right, well, let's get into this a little bit more in our Kathleen Turner Overdrive. So we're at the point of this show where we need to start winding it down. So what we do is a final summary and review, and then we give a score out of 10. You can go a decimal point deep. We'll slice and dice this thing. I'll start with you, Robert, so you can slice and dice. So you can give Shaheen something to pattern after, and then Shaheen, you can go, then I'll go, and then we'll wind this one down. And Robert, maybe as a starting point for you for your final summary and review, what's the overall message? What's the story arc here? Like, what are we taking away from this? Does Batman learn anything? Do we, as a viewer, learn anything as a result? Because Batman had been retired. He was itching to get back into this, but he's older, slower, not quite as capable, but he feels like maybe it was a mistake that he had left. So take it away.
Well, I don't know. This is a complex piece of work. I think this is a very mature storyline, and it might be a bit of a decent criticism to say that it's tackling on too many different ideas and too many themes all in one story. But for me, my favorite storyline, I suppose, is the Batman v Superman stuff. And this notoriously got raped in versus Superman, Dawn of Justice. And with all the good stuff taken out, and they just took the Batman in a bat suit fighting Superman, and it's way dumber. But for me, this is an individualism versus collectivism argument, where Superman is claiming this higher authority and this greater good kind of idea of like America and the good guys, and we're going to go kill these other people, or we're going to take care of Batman because he's out of control, as if he's their thing. They have a right to control him, as if it's their responsibility. And Batman's like, no, I'm going to use my own judgment about what I think is best and extract justice as I see fit in my own individual way. And I'm not looking to anybody else to tell me what to do. There's a line in the film that exemplifies this thing where Superman's like, you're breaking the law, Clark. You're breaking the law. And Batman goes, we are criminals, Clark. We always have been. And either that's him recognizing that the law isn't always right and that he operates outside it, but he still thinks he's doing the right thing, and that government is fallible and wrong, and that he knows better than a bunch of bureaucrats do. Or he thinks that, he's doing bad things. And I tend to believe that he doesn't believe he's doing bad things. I think he thinks of himself as the hero, and I think believes he's doing the right thing as best he knows how. And I don't think it's an accident that if you watch this movie, it's almost impossible to root for Superman, to think he's the good guy in this story. I don't even know if there's a way you could tell Superman's part in this story from a perspective in which he's the good guy. So he's this bootlicker that goes around and does these horrible things from some other guy that he believes has the authority to tell him to do these things. And from the audience's perspective and from Batman's perspective, you go, really? You don't even question these things you're being told, Superman? What? This is a joke. I'm going to do this, and if you're going to come at me, bro, we're going to throw down. And that's what's going to happen. And may the best man win, and we'll see what's what. And so I cheer when Batman beats Superman up in this movie. And I always wanted a big screen version of it to be like reflective, super awesome. And then we got what we got, and it was a shit show. But this movie is great. And I would say it's a strong 9 out of 10. It's really high up there for me in terms of best animated movies. I think it's really high up there for best Batman movie of all time or best comic book movie of all time. I think it's just really strong. It's got the potential to be a really great live action movie, or you could just leave it as it is. I think it's fantastic. I think the original comic book is fantastic, and it's a nuanced adult story that is worth your time. So check it out. Shaheen?
All right, yeah, like I said before, it's one of my favorite Batman storylines of all time. Yeah, we can give decimal points, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'll probably go a 9.5 out of 10. It's just, and what I took away from this movie is just how stupid just other groups can be. Like you have the ANCOM groups, the hippies, the bootlicker status, the people in power, like the presidents, the police commissioners, the mayoral office. Who else was there? Neo-Nazis, just about everyone. How everyone can be. Just the average people. How like they can make like like random. Oh, we can't judge the Joker. He's the victim or something like that. And like the psychologist guy, how stupid all these groups can be, and why it's important to have to always be questioning them the way like Batman would, and have your own sense of justice, your own morality outside of what is legislation. And I guess something that's not too related to libertarianism is just being a badass and beating the shit out of people when they deserve it, I guess.
All right, well, I guess it's my turn now. And Shaheen, I want to thank you for being a guest for us. I
Thanks for
found...
having me.
Yes, and I'll give you a moment to throw out your Twitter handle and where people can find your writings and whatnot in a moment here. This was a movie that I had not even been aware of until it got recommended, and I ended up buying it on our Vudu because there was like a Batman day, and all the Batman stuff was on special for like $3 or $4. So I picked this up, and I was like, okay, maybe my kids will like watching some cartoon Batman. Well, since I watched it this week, there's no way I'd let my 3 and 5-year-olds watch Batman Dark Knight Returns. But it is, like Robert had mentioned, a very mature storyline, and that's probably one of the reasons I wouldn't let the kids watch it. But it's pretty graphic and violent, and it's got a lot of interesting plays on the individuality and choosing what's objectively moral and what is subjectively what you're going to do about it, how you're going to react in certain situations. There's a lot of bootlicking going on. There's a lot of corruption, both in the military and in the police. Batman, after having left crime fighting in Gotham, the police didn't do a great job. It pretty much went to shit, and roving gangs were running rampant. And I think that is partly the nature of a monopoly bureaucratic service, such as the police and justice, and not having any opportunity for competitors. In general, I think that this was a very well done animated film. I have not read the comic book, but now that I've watched this, I think that I do want to seek that out. So, Robert, if you have that, maybe bring that up the next time you're up this way, and I'll give it a peruse. But I'm going to go with an 8.5 on this. I think that it was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it. So everyone do check this one out. Dark Knight Returns, the old Batman using his wily, sage-old advice to defeat the bad guys one last time. And he's the man who beat Superman, super status bootlicker Superman. Just terrible in this movie. But anyway, Shaheen, where can people find you? Where can they follow you on the old Twitter? And then, Robert, I will mention what we're going to do next, and we will end the show.
Well, my Twitter would be presuming.
Say that one more time. It might have dropped it.
No. My Twitter handle will be on the show notes page.
Oh, yes, that is correct.
So yeah, find me through there, and go to backwardsmusic.com or just look up Backwards, Eric July's band, and go on Backwards News. And I've written a couple of articles and plan to be writing more. Just go to Actual Anarchy, because I make sure that you guys republish my works there. Or if you want to see what I'm... And yeah, feel free to, if you want to talk to me or anything on Twitter, ask any questions, feel free to do it.
All right, well, thank you very much, Shaheen. It has been a pleasure having you on. And we will have you stay on with us for Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters. And that can be found. You can send us dollar bills, y'all, at lastnighters.com/Patreon. The next episode we're going to do, I believe, is Liar, Liar, the Jim Carrey movie about him being a lawyer, in celebration of our friend Patrick McFarlane passing the bar exam and becoming an official lawyer. And so he will join us as a guest on that episode next week. So that should be a lot of fun. And Jim Carrey's been in the news lately talking about how great socialism is. So we'll have plenty to rip on him about as he, in real life, is a liar, and also Dumb and Dumber. So that'll be our show next week. You can find the show notes and more for this episode on lastnighters.com/39. I appreciate you guys all joining us. Robert, a final word before we say goodnight from last night.
Well, I want to thank Shaheen for coming on again, talking about Batman. I'm always happy to talk about Batman, especially when it's a good movie. And I want to thank everybody else for listening, tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
All right, peace out, everyone. right, a few more minutes on the actual Anarchy audience. So, Shaheen, don't hold back, all right? You can say what you really feel. And then we'll get into Caffeine Turn Overdrive after this.
I kind of did. I wasn't holding back. Like, we did go into some deep libertarian ethics there. Like, I thought that was a normie-friendly show.
Well, mostly the name only. When Robert and I decided to do the Last Nighters version of the show, it was more shareable and hopefully, get more traffic and all of that. But we promised ourselves we wouldn't hold back on what we wanted to say. It's just we wanted to kind of put a candy shell around it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's the rumor anyway. That's what we try to accomplish. And we're now also on the Launchpad Media. So we've got Actual Anarchy Show, we've got the Last Nighters Show, and then we're also on Launchpad. And among those three versions, we get, I think, over 1,000 listens every week, which is pretty amazing because now there's three of us, but we're just a couple of dumb guys who talk about movies and like Rothbard. So it's pretty cool. I appreciate having listeners. So thank you guys for listening.
Double and second that. Daniel is correct.
I occasionally am. So any last things you guys want to mention before we get into Kathleen Turner Overdrive, and then we can do that.
Well, do you want to talk Batman stuff or just general stuff?
Whatever you're feeling like, because we've got some more of the vigilante justice stuff to talk about in the KTO.
Okay. Well, if we want to get into more Batman stuff, I can hold my stuff. It's all good.
All right, hold your stuff. Oh, and speaking of holding our stuff, we do have another Patreon supporter that came on board. So Patreon people are glomming onto us like flies. That is awesome. That tells us that we're doing something right. And we have taken some of these funds, and we have bought those cameras we mentioned a few shows back. So very shortly, we're going to have higher-end cameras and potentially replacements of backgrounds and things like that. So it should be maybe something cool. But we can always use more, so hit us up on the Patreon. I mentioned it like 6 times this show. I feel like I'm begging. But anyway, why don't we wind this down and get into the KTO? You boys ready?
I think so.
All right, sounds good. Well, hey, everyone, actualanarchy.com/96. Show notes and more for this episode on Dark Knight. We're going to get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive, so thank you guys very much. We appreciate it, and peace out, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.